Hi, I'm Aditi. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to build a React Native chat screen from scratch using the Vercel AI SDK, the Gemini model, including real-time streaming text, message state management, and a clean component architecture using Atomic Design. We'll focus on structuring the screen properly so the UI, AI logic, and state don't all collapse into one massive file. This video is part of my full app building series, which I'll link down below, but you can also watch this on its own if you're specifically interested in building a streaming AI chat interface in Expo. Let's get right into it. So, as you guys can see, the folder that I'm in currently has a lot of code from before. Again, check out my previous videos in this playlist if you want a better idea of how we got here. But yeah, this is what we're working with. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do here is install the dependencies that we need. So that's going to be the package AI as well as the AI SDK / Google. Throughout this, I'm going to be referencing a lot actually the Expo Quick Start Guide from the AI SDK. They have a really good documentation for literally everything, but I find that especially this specific thing is super duper helpful for us to get started with. Okay, so now that this is installed, the first thing that I want to do actually is go ahead and get our API key. So that we're going to get from Google Generative AI Studio. Basically just look it up, you sign in with your Google account, and it should give you this API key. And then in your env file, you want to create something that looks like this. Okay, here's mine. You want to create a key and you want to use these specific words because Vercel looks for this specific key. And then we want to just paste in whatever you have. Okay, boom, that's out of the way. The next thing that we want to do is go ahead and create the actual API logic. So the screen that we're going to be working with today is just the main chat API, right? So essentially, I'm going to create a new folder first called API. And in this, we're going to call something called chat.api. Essentially, adding this plus API lets Expo Router know that it's specifically an API route. Now, what this means is that Expo allows you to create functions that are executed when someone requests this route. So for example, post or get, like if somebody does, our URL, or if we're trying to call our URL and then we do /chat and then we supply it with the post request, then it executes a function that we define in here, essentially. So what's in this? Again, we can just go back and we can look at this this documentation. We're going to copy this almost pretty much exactly. Again, I'm on this tab called the provider tab because Vercel has this thing called Gateway where you can use multiple different models, but for the purposes of this app, we're just going to stick to one. So I'm using this specific sample code that they have here. I'll just paste it in. And essentially what this is doing is it's calling this request, and we're using streaming text. Vercel does a good job at explaining this in the documentation, but streaming text just means that, when you request an LLM, you don't want the user to get one giant block of text and have them wait a really long time. You want everything to be maybe like a couple sentences, a couple words at a time, and that's called streaming. So yeah, we have that here. The only thing that we're going to change from this is actually including our own custom prompt. Now, this is a part of the app building series that I'm working on. This custom prompt sort of fits with that. In here, all right, we're going to copy and paste this. I have the prompt. It's super long, but it makes sense when you consider the actual requirements of my project. Here. Memory system prompt. Okay. Okay, essentially this prompt, let me minimize this, here we go. This prompt is sort of treating and explaining to the Gemini assistant, okay, here's your job. You are a memory assistant, which is the basis of this app. And you're just trying to gather this information and better output it in this specific format. So I'll put this in the description for you guys to use if you want to. but let me just go through this quickly. Essentially, this is just giving very specific instructions on what to do. yeah, it took me a while to modify this prompt, that's for sure, because you start off with something, and I think in the beginning when I was building this app, it wasn't being very specific with the memories that it extracted. For example, if somebody said like, oh, I went to the store, it would just save that. But that in and of itself is not really like a memory, right? You would need more details. Okay, you went to the store. What did you buy? What did you do there? Like, did you meet someone there? That would be sort of the vein of conversation that it should go on. But again, so this is just a lot of like adding and adding and adding, and this is what it gives you. So it's gonna have tags, an emotional tone. So that's pretty much like, okay, like what one tone word can you deduce from what the user has told you so far, the location, the people, the category, and then the text. We're gonna implement some of this in a different way in the next video, where we talk about persisting this memory actually to Supabase using and connecting it to the user data that we created in the last video. But right now, this is just what we know that it should be logging, or that it should be in outputting. But yeah, okay. So let's go ahead and jump right on to the next part. Now again, to call this specific post URL, to make a post request to this URL, we want to include a utils file. Basically, they talk more about this right here. Here, create an API route. We want, where did it go? Oh, right here. Okay, so this is what we need. Essentially, we want to add this to our a specific file right here. I'm gonna do it in our main directory for at the moment. So we're just gonna, oh, not in there. We can just do it right here. TS, and we're just gonna import this. This basically just, as it says over here, instead of using, like, to make sure that we use the correct base URL. So in development, that's going to be our local URL, but then in production, it's going to be something different. This just helps keep that like all in check. And then we want to set this Expo public base URL. This is just like, because we're in development, we don't really have to worry about that, but this is for later. Okay, so now that we have this done, next thing that we want to do is actually go in and start creating some of this AI logic. So again, atomic design, right? That means that we're going to create each section of the page differently. Let me pull it up on Figma so I can show you guys better what I mean. All right, so as you guys can see, there's a lot on this specific chat page, but the parts that we're going to focus on for today is to create or is to think about how we're going to break this apart, right? So the index page has some things that are specific to it. You know, that's going to be our text component. That's going to be what it says in the text component. It's going to be this little circle background. But what might not be exclusive to this page would be the input box, right? So that we can break apart into a molecule, and in that we can have a specific thing for Mike, and so on and so forth. We definitely want to create or separate how we're going to make these chat bubbles. So the whole message list should be an organism, and each chat bubble should be its own molecule. So let's go ahead and work on splitting that up. So right here, I just have the iOS simulator open and Expo Go open on that. Before we start our server, let's go into main and then our index.ts. As you can see, I just put in the sign out button. We can leave that on here for now. That's not a problem. We'll just put it somewhere else when we find some more space for it. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Before we call any of what we actually want to call, I'm gonna leave this for now, and we want to define some constants. So we want to create that input that we're gonna reference later and pass to our input component, but I'm just gonna keep that ready for now. This is just gonna be like what we're gonna type into, or what the user's gonna type into. We also want to have a scroll ref for our scroll view when we go ahead and add the message list. So we're gonna add that. There we go. Let's save this. Okay. And now the next thing that we can move on to doing is go ahead and creating, essentially we want to use a hook called use chat memory. This hook, what it's going to do is just go ahead and parse the memory data from what the user is saying, combine everything, and then have the AI actually parse all of that information and then turn it into one singular memory based off of all the chats, strip that data from whatever we don't need, etc., etc., etc. So we're going to call two different things from here, which will be better once we're done. But for right now, they're just going to be undefined. But that's okay. We'll come back. So use chat memory. There we go. And then we're going to pass to it messages. Okay, so what are the messages? Well, great question. Let's go ahead and use this chat functionality and actually make the messages aspect of it work. Okay, so we have the messages, which we're receiving, and we want to be able to send a message. And for this, we're going to use something from the chat library. Here we go. Use chat. Okay, here we go. This is the, if we go back and we look at the documentation, this is the, here we go, right here. We can just copy and paste this from here. This looks pretty much the same that we want. Okay, that's good. We can, for now, we can have this error as well. Just make sure to import that. And this generate API URL. This also we need to import expo fetch. I'm doing it by itself, but it should be. Oh, fetch. There we go. Import fetch. But okay, because that creates sort of a problem, we want to call this expo fetch. And we want to import this as import, here we go, fetch as expo fetch from expo.fetch. That should work. Okay, great. So now this part of our functionality is done. This is what we want to create next. So I'm going to go to hooks right here, and we want to make one called use chat memory. And essentially what this is going to do is, again, like I said before, it's going to parse it and make it into something that we can save, and in that same format that we were talking about before, for our next video. But let's just keep it ready now. Okay, so this is the format that we're going with. All right, so these are the two functions that we want to pass. So parse memory data, which is going to take in as a string, and it's going to make that. So it's going to check if it actually matches the format that we're looking for. That was extra. There we go. If it actually matches the format that we're looking for, so that's going to be our text.match. Whoops, there we go, .match. And the format that we're looking for, again, remember, is memory data. And here we go. This is just saying that we don't want anything after. We wanted to have the brackets after this, but here we go. Dot. Okay. We don't want this around it. Whoops. Okay. And finally, we're going to see if it doesn't match, just return null. If it does, we want to parse it there. Autocomplete for us. And then finally, we want this strip memory data as well. And that's also going to take in this text string. And this is just going to do text.split. So it's just going to get rid of that bit and just, yep. Now, finally, we want to create this variable called pending memory. And what pending memory does is if we're in the middle of talking to our assistant about the memory, it makes sure that it takes in the actual assistant's message as well, so that it gives the model more context as to what the user might be responding to. So if it's an assistant, then we want to add that to parse memory data. So, whoa, last dot. oh, of course, I gotta explain what last is. Const last is gonna be the most recent message. And we're gonna check to see if these parts, so any part, and then just, there we go, just join, or it's null. Okay, and then finally, we want to return exactly what it just said. Yeah, okay. So this is it. We can go back in here. We can just use that, just like that. And we're good for this page for now. Now, this obviously doesn't really work because we haven't set up every other bit of it, but we'll come back to this once we wire up all the small parts of the UI, and then we'll see this all working together. So, like I said before, we want this to start with the input. So we're gonna go into Atoms over here, and we're gonna create something called input. All right, so let's start by building out this input. Yeah, okay. So the first thing that we want to do is actually make this. Okay, so our input component is going to have a couple of props. Essentially, we wanted to have the actual value, of course. When we change it, we want it to update, so we're going to have that on send, and then on mic. Again, for right now, some of these things are placeholders, but we'll come back to that. Okay. And those are just defining the props, and then we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so one thing that we want to define, one variable that we want to define is called has text. Essentially, we're just checking, essentially if there's any text. This is going to come into play in just a minute. I'll show you guys. Okay, so return. We want a view that has a wrapper style. So that's going to be styles.wrapper. Okay, so styles.wrapper, let's define what styles actually is. So that's going to be, so we want to import the style sheet from React Native. There we go. And then we want to do, I'm going to create something called styles sheet. Uh-oh. Okay. We'll define that wrapper in just a minute, but let's import that. Okay, so we want our actual text input, and this is gonna have a couple of styles of its own. No, this is just, okay. So style, we need the actual style for this input itself. So that's gonna be style.input. And we also want a placeholder value. We can call this create a new memory. ... And we want to give that a text color, which we're going to import from our theme. So colors.brown.medium, because we want it kind of grayed out. We want the value to be the value. So let's just go on change text. Make sure we call that same onChange function from before. And then finally, this can be multi-line, so that's okay. Okay, we also want right next to it a pressable. Kind of filled it in, but here. There we go, let's just right click and here, but instead of a view, we want this to be actually an Ionicons icon, which we can get from Expo Vector icons, which is really cool. Actually, we can use a lot of different icons without using it or trying to get a new library. Just Expo Vector icons comes built in. So there we go, there's our Ionicons. The name has to depend. Here's what I was talking about with the has text. If there's text, we want to display the send button. If there's not text, we want to display the mic button. Okay. But for this, we don't want white, we want brown.darkest, and we're not gonna apply. We're gonna give this button itself a style. We're gonna call this styles.icon. There we go. I think we might not need this, but I'm gonna keep this just in case we do. Okay, so let's go ahead add these styles in. So for the wrapper, I'm gonna keep it pretty simple. Let me just copy the stuff that I have right here. Yeah, here we go. So we're gonna import that radius again from our theme, the spacing X, the spacing variables as well. And this is gonna be our text stuff. Okay, so let's see. What are we missing? We do need a button style, so I'm gonna go ahead and just create that as well. This can be pretty simple. We'll just give it a width. We want to import scale though, so we're gonna give it a width and height of the same thing to make it like a square. We definitely want a border radius, so that can be maybe radius 6. Yeah. Give it a background color. Colors dot. We can do brown dot light. Looks good. And then we just want to make sure that the icon is in the center. So I guess we don't really need any styles for the icon itself. There. Okay. So that's our input. I know it's a little weird to not be able to look at it yet, but we'll come back to this. Yeah, okay. So we have our input done. Now we have to move on and build out what our chat bubble would look like. I guess we could add an input right here just so that we can see what it would look like. So here's our input component. What do we need? We need a value for it, so that can be test input. And then let's just, oh, of course we gotta start our server, so npx expo start. And we can just reload. Let me try now. Okay. All right, so here's what we see right now. I'm just gonna change this to be this variable right here that we define as our input. And then we wanna say that on change, set input. Okay, so that's what we have for now. We are now going to go ahead and set up the chat bubbles. So that's gonna go in our atoms again. So chat bubble.tsx. Let's see what we have to do for this one. So it's gonna start the same way. Yeah, we can call it chat bubble. It's gonna take in something called like it's gonna take in what role it is, so either like the user or the assistant, and then also the actual text of it. And those are two properties, and I have to define what they actually are. Okay, it's like filling it in for us. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, what do we need to do now? Let's see. So we want to create a container. So we have this view, and then inside of that, we want to make our bubble, and then inside of the bubble, we're gonna put in the text. So the text is gonna look like that. Yeah, there. Let's give this some styling. So here's how we're gonna set this up. Essentially, we want to be different based off of whether or not it's auto-completing for me. Hold on, let me turn this off. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so we're gonna define, oh, we need to create our style sheet first, actually. Let's go ahead and do that. So, React Native, let's make our style sheet, and let's go ahead and create it. Okay, so we want to do maybe something called container, and then depending on whether or not it's a user, we want to see, we would set it to user, otherwise give it an assistant style. Okay, here let's define that variable actually. So const is user is equal to the role, if the role is user. Okay, all right, so, oh, we gotta capitalize that. And then inside of here, we're gonna have our actual bubble. So that's gonna be like this, is user, and then the bubble for that. Okay, let's see. Oh, these need to be brackets. There we go. And I'm gonna just copy and paste these styles right here. Give this another style called text. There. All right. I'm gonna import all these. Again, I'll leave the theme down in the description box below so you guys can like reference that. Just make sure that all these are imported. Perfect. Okay, so that's gonna be our chat bubble. We're gonna use this in just a sec on the index screen, but we wanna create a molecule for the actual chat messages. So this, we wanna maybe send in like what we get right into this like chat messages molecule, and that's going to use these chat bubbles and like separate the logic of like, okay, like this is a user, so like pass that to this chat bubble text, chat bubble like, component, so on and so forth. So let's work on that. I'm going to create a new folder, sorry, new file, messages sex. Let's do the same thing. Okay. All right, so what is this gonna do? We just want it's like a simple view. It's just gonna map all the messages that we have. So it's gonna take in a parameter messages. Well, let me do that part first. It's gonna take in a parameter messages, and we also, yeah, strip memory data, we need that. And then the type is any, that's fine. Yep, okay. So we're gonna take in messages, and then for each message, we are going to set up am I missing something? Hold on, let me do this again. Here we go. Messages.map. And then in here, we're gonna pass in this. Our arrow function, there we go. Okay, so for each message, we have our text, which is gonna be what we get for our actual, let's see. So if what we get is of type text, then we wanna set that equal to text. And then we're gonna take that, and for each of those characters, we're going to join them with our with this right there, package p there. All right, and then let me get rid of that. Okay, now if it's an assistant, then that means that we're gonna have to change this thing around right here. So we have to strip the memory data what we were looking at before and have it respond with that information. So here we go, text. And then we're gonna return chat bubble component that we just built, and we're gonna pass to it. Here it goes, yeah. Okay, so that's gonna be our ID, because we do need to pass that so that it's all in order. We're gonna give it our role, which is gonna be m.role. And then finally, we're gonna pass the text, which is just gonna be the display. All right, so now it's just up to using these components in index. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can get rid of this now because you don't really need to see the title. And this as well. And what we can say instead here is pass in a scroll view. we'll comment this out for now as well. And in here we can put in our let's do that stuff first. Okay, so the ref, which we already made before, our scroll ref, and then let's see, now let's pass in this chat messages, import that. Okay, and oops, wait, the message that we're gonna give it is equal to the messages that we're getting, and that's what we're gonna pass here. Strip memory data. All right. And then we want to make sure that at whenever a new message gets added, that we scroll to the end. So let's do just move the scroll ref down to the bottom, and then I'm gonna set animated to be true so that it's like smooth. Okay, that's good. That's good. All right. And then our input, we want to make sure that it actually works. So on send, we want to say send that message. So we defined this before, but we've defined a function called send message. So using that, we're going to pass whatever input that we get as the text. And then we are also going to set the input to be 0. Or sorry, be nothing after the message has been sent. Okay, now hopefully this should work. Yeah, let's say something. Let's say hello. Oh, it gives a warning right here. Let's go to app.json and let's do that. Web.output. Okay. Okay. Let me restart this. And oh, here we go. It just went through. I'm gonna reload it and we can do it again. It's like tweaking. Oh, why is it doing that? 1 second. I'm gonna switch to the development build. Here we go. All right. It won't let me reload. That's odd. Let me try it again. It seems to be working. Let's say, I have memory. What does it have to say? Okay, here we go. Yeah, it's working. So it's like I'm sure that once you reload this message history isn't gonna stay, but yeah, it's just working for now. Tell me about it. I'd love to hear. It's doing exactly what we mentioned in the prompt. So like if you go back and we look at that, the prompt is very detailed in terms of what we're looking for. So it's just asking like more questions, just how we asked. So that's pretty much it for this video. We built out the chat flow, we modified a prompt, and it's connecting to the Vercel, using Vercel AI SDK to call on Gemini and like have this conversation, right? In the next video, we're gonna focus more on actually like taking the memories that it gains, this memory data that it outputs, and turning it into an actual memory that gets saved in our Supabase database as like a vector, entry. So that's when we have to actually check and be like, okay, like when is the user done with the memory, then we have to like trigger a pop-up that asks like, hey, do you want to save the memory now? So all of that stuff we're gonna do in the next video. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.